Hi, welcome back to our brand new series, Next Big Fin. Guys, very excited today for a few reasons. First of all, we are in top 1,000 list for YouTube channels in Singapore. I am still a little bit, overwhelmed, as you can see when I'm talking about this. It has been an amazing journey, so makes me very happy, makes me very edgy also today. So, two, we have an amazing co-host who's been doing amazing work in the industry. Jeet, you will hear from him a little later. And the third part, which is the biggest reason to be excited, is the fintech we have today is absolutely doing amazing work. All of the fintechs we've talked to are doing amazing work, but they are going out there and they are challenging the norm of large language models. They are like based out of Singapore. They're doing some amazing work. They're helping financial institutions transform a lot. Guys, I'm a little edgy today, so a little overwhelmed with the news because it just came in. So, please, we are not going to delete all of this so that you know how excited or edgy I am. So with that, I want to welcome Partha. Hi, Partha.
Thank you.
Our audience would love to hear from you. Now, honestly, I can take a break also from speaking. Please introduce yourself and Pints.
All right. So I'm Partha. I'm one of the co-founders of Pints AI. We're a Singaporean company. We started as taking the whole view that the rest of the world was going towards building larger and larger and larger models, which is amazing, but it comes with certain compromises on privacy. We took the exact opposite direction. We basically went there when everyone else was going on the other direction, and we started going smaller. So we built compact models wherever the company, like financial institution, whether it's a bank or an insurance company or a broker or a wealth manager, has data that they can't bring on to larger models because there's a problem of data transfer. We essentially build models from ground up and deploy it in their infrastructure.
Right. Great intro. And this is a question I am thinking about. If you build a wrapper today on a large language model, you can raise billions of dollars, if not billions, but millions of dollars, right? Now you have taken this contrarian approach. Let's go a little deeper into it. Why are you taking a contrarian approach?
Got it. Okay. So firstly, not all wrappers are bad. I mean, there are some wrappers which actually do make sense. Like I think the large language models like ChatGPT do some really, really amazing stuff. When you build workflows on top of any LLM, which solves a real world problem, I think there's a lot of value over there.
Right.
So there are a lot of good quality companies, good wrappers, which actually make a lot of sense. Why then we are taking a contrarian view is because of the problem that we are trying to solve. And the problem that we are trying to solve is to protect our clients' data and keep it where it is supposed to be. Like we don't want any part of that particular data, not for training our models, not for using it for any other purpose as well. So when you say that it is a privacy related issue, then you just cannot use the same framework that the large language models do or even wrappers do, because at the end of it, the data does go outside of the ecosystem that the client is supposed to have. Because we said that we want to work in that particular part where privacy is front and center to every decision that we do, is why we essentially took the contrarian approach, where we said we want to build models which are smaller, which are more powerful, which can be deployed in compute sort of constrained infrastructure that exists in many parts of the world, but people can still use it very effectively for solving certain very, very real problems that they have in their organizations.
Right. And a great answer. But Partha, let me ask you this question, and we are going to dive a little deeper into this. You're giving me some really great points here. Now, when you go to a bank, and I work with fair share of financial institutions, right? You tell them this is going to be on-prem, they lose their mind because they have a mandate to move everything to cloud.
Yeah.
So talk to us about how those conversations are going with those banks, and how are they reacting to you coming back and taking a contrarian view?
Sure. So the question of whether it should be on-prem, and when I say on-prem, it's like in the physical premise,
yes,
or by extension on your virtual private cloud, like your own cloud infrastructure. is sort of a degree of scale. Like it's on a continuum.
Yeah.
There are still companies which are on-prem. There are law firms. There are family offices. They operate on-prem.
Yep.
A lot of them. They do also operate on cloud. They have some part of their organizational data on cloud. The movement is largely towards cloud on one particular side, but the other side to look at it is that we are talking about going on device when it comes to AI.
Yeah.
So whether it is like companies like Apple or Microsoft or just about anyone else, we're talking about the limits of privacy, essentially, of guarding your own data comes down to whether the AI is in your hardware at the end of it, which is essentially on-prem.
Right.
That's what the on-prem part is. So the question is, what part of your data resides where should dictate which AI strategy will you use, rather than sitting and throwing things around based on the option that you have, and if that's the only constrained option that you have. So the way we look at this is, there are companies which have on-prem, then the model should be on-prem. There are companies which say that, oh, our data is on this particular cloud, then Pints AI model should be on that particular cloud. So we don't want clients to sit and change their entire data strategy or hosting strategy or infra strategy.
Right.
We go where their data is, because that's probably the best way that they can guard their infrastructure and their data correctly.
Right. And now, so basically you're telling me that a data privacy approach, a privacy first approach is not necessarily one of on-prem, but you can also do it on cloud, but it is an approach that has to be thought in that way.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
What do you think the banks are getting wrong about AI and all the large language and small language models?
I think one of the things that we've seen where I could certainly say that some banks or financial institutions are going wrong is that they tend to look at AI as one LLM rules all workflows kind of a strategy.
Right.
It's probably not the best. Different LLMs have different capabilities. And we already are seeing a lot of like mature is a very, very strong term, I think, when it comes to AI. Like the whole industry is in its act one, still in its infancy.
Yeah.
But like people who have really put thought and effort into it, like companies which have put thought and effort into it, they are already looking at multi LLM or multi AI kind of a deployment.
Yeah.
And then orchestrating their workflows. So companies which essentially say that this is the only LLM we will use, or the only vendor or the only partner we will use, I think that's one of the biggest roadblocks to true innovation, because then you're not using the best model out there for the work that you want to do or to sit on top of your data,
Right.
but you're just basically using whatever comes your way in, and I don't think that is the right approach going forward. And in the same way, not just from a LLM 1 versus LLM 2, but there could, like, the right strategy is to say that, okay, I'm going to use the large language models, and there are compact language models like ours, which kind of work with the part of organization's data that is not easily available for, being traded with.
Yep. No, great answer. Let's shift the vantage point to a different side. Right now, I open internet, I see this AI person has raised 100 million, this person has raised 200 million, etc., which is all primarily in the Valley in the US.
Yeah.
When I speak to AI firms in Singapore, they are like, the exuberance is lacking in the Singapore ecosystem.
Yeah.
What you are right at the center of this.
Yeah.
You're doing some amazing groundbreaking work here. What do you think is missing in the Singapore AI ecosystem?
So I think we need to look at it from a few angles. The Silicon Valley is the Silicon Valley for a reason. Capital is available.
Yeah.
I mean, it's available in far greater amounts than I think most parts of the world. There's a higher risk-taking appetite over there as an ecosystem, because the capital is just basically more, and there are more sort of companies or VCs or investors willing to deploy more capital over there. I think when it comes to Asia, there is a challenge in that particular part, and capital becomes like a little difficult to raise, especially when it comes to AI. In the last 1.5 years, the general perception has always been that you need to raise millions and millions of dollars in order to build bigger and bigger models, billions of dollars, really. When we started actually talking to people around saying that, hey, we're building our own model, this is our framework, a lot of people actually split into a few camps. One was, why are you even building your model? Like, why can't you just use the models that are being built in the Silicon Valley? Like, most research is happening only in US and in China. And our view actually was that that's not entirely true. There's
Yep.
phenomenal research happening in Singaporean universities. There are some amazing research papers that come out of Singapore. My co-founder Calvin's doing his PhD in SUTD, and there is that university is responsible for one of the best small language models, which is Tiny Llama.
Yep.
So when you have such research going on in various parts, like I think the ecosystem wasn't recognizing it, let's say about 6 to 8 months ago. So that's the first challenge that comes in. Like, do people are people aware of what is happening in the ecosystem on
Yep.
AI? The second part was, as I said, like people were going towards larger and larger models. So all the news that was coming out was, oh, a company raises $400 million and builds like, I don't know, like a trillion parameter model and so on and so forth. And here we're saying that we want to shrink it. A lot of people, I don't think, believed that the small models could actually work as effectively for the use cases.
Yeah.
So we took it upon us to say that, okay, let's just build it and prove it. And I think we're definitely one of the first companies. I don't know whether we're the first, but we're definitely one of the first companies in Asia to actually have pre-trained a model from scratch. We're one where we have clients who are using our framework in order to run their internal processes. And I think we had to take that approach, saying that whatever we were talking, we could walk the talk, like we could show that this works. And I think now we are in that situation where, companies like IBM, companies like Microsoft themselves, like who also build ChatGPT, but are saying that small language models make sense. Infosys is talking about building SLMs for specialized use cases in banking where they usually do. So everything that we've been saying for the last 1 year is sort of now the ecosystem recognizing as something that completely makes sense.
No, and I must tell the audience this, that that I have had the privilege of seeing the journey for Pints, Partha, Calvin. Calvin is, by the way, an Air Force pilot. We will bring that story out a little later in the episode. And I've seen their journey, and I think it has been a little heartbreaking, and it has been inspiring at the same time, because it has been heartbreaking because these guys are doing amazing work, and it has been a very, very challenging ecosystem to raise money in, etc. And there is so much misunderstanding about how AI should work. And then obviously it has been inspiring because these guys have, like, really, with their determination and with their pure grit, they've just powered through, and they're solving some real life use cases. They're solving some real challenges. Now let's talk to you about some use cases that you are solving for. So why don't you give us a couple of examples?
So firstly, I'll say that yes, it's been challenging, but I think it's been a gift in some way. Like, we're fully revenue funded now. Like, our whole team runs on revenue. We invest our revenue into building new models and building new frameworks, which I think is an amazing space to be in as a startup.
Yes, it is.
So thank God for that. The second part that I would say is use cases, right? I think firstly, what we need to recognize is compact models are also LLMs. Like, they are essentially language models. They are just smaller. So the use cases are multiple. It's based on how you want to deploy. The ones where we work, and I can give a few examples, like instead of just like postulating theories, like, so we work in the space of insurance, asset management, corporate law. And how we work is essentially this. We turn organizational data into intelligence, and we connect it into an actual asset that needs to be deployed. Like, for example, if you're an insurance company, you have a lot of data about your policies. You also have data of your competitors' policies. So if you have a client who wants a quote, you are going to explain the client, like, your insurance, compare it to your competitor's insurance, convince that particular client to buy in with you. And then based on the client's questions that are asked during that sales process, you're going to create a custom pricing proposal for the client. It sounds simple, but it takes a lot of different places where you need to pull this data in.
Absolutely.
And there is PII data involved. Like, are you flouting the rules of PDPA or, let's say, GDPR in Europe? Are your regulators okay with the client's KYC documents and the medical documents being put on any AI model that you're bringing into the ecosystem of your sort of organization? Our model essentially sits on the client's infrastructure, orchestrates all this data, and can create custom pricing proposals for the clients.
Right.
Which essentially pulls your data from pricing, from your risk analysis engine, and all of it, and stitches together a pricing proposal, all while being within the client's private infrastructure.
Absolutely amazing. And I'll tell you, I sit down with all these, financial institutes on a daily basis. I cannot see a path forward where they can put all of this PII or client recognizable data on a open like cloud.
Correct.
Like I cannot see a path forward. The risk compliance, etc., will never really move forward. So in essence, what you are saying is that this will be the only, whether they do it with Pints or they do it with somebody else, etc., is irrelevant. I hope they do it with Pints. But the point is that they will have to come and do a compact language model, and they will have to do it in the way that you are suggesting. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
As of right now, it seems like the best way to go forward. I mean, you need to look at it from a perspective of, again, the best tool for the job. Like, you're not going to take a flamethrower and light a birthday candle. Right. You need a match for it.
Right.
So if your use case requires you to use a small model, you should be using small model. Like what's happening right now is, and I'll give you an example of a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago. There's this client that we're talking to right now. It's not yet a client, a prospect.
Yeah.
They did 38 POCs. With synthetic data or like sort of simulated data. They loved about 7 or 8 of them. They wanted to go into production, and the compliance team basically said absolute no.
Yeah.
None of them are going to go forward because they're either flouting internal guidelines or external like regulatory guidelines. And one answer to that is essentially compact models which sit on your infrastructure, because then there is no data leaking outside. So as of right now, the best way to look at it is if you have use cases which do require large models, which can be, your data is not private, the data is not sensitive. Let's say you're using brochures and you're using sort of marketing material. I think there are other LLMs are fantastic for it. But the moment your data becomes sensitive and it becomes a topic of, let's say, contention between, the head of revenue or head of sales who wants a particular process to be solved for, his or her team, and then risk compliance or regulators don't allow you to do it, then the option is to use a compact model.
Partha, great answer. Now, see, a large part of Digijanus' audience is in wealth management, front, middle office, etc. Let us talk about a couple of use cases that you're seeing now, because you have caught our attention really well. You're talking about a model that can use PII or preference data, etc., on-prem. So that increases the surface area of what's possible with AI very significantly. Let's talk through a few use cases that you are seeing, building, discussing internally as a team.
Perfect. So let's actually, again, this is live use case. Like we're talking to, a few people about this. Let's say you're RM and you're handling the portfolio of like a few ultra high net worth individuals, and data is sensitive because you're talking about their money being deployed in multiple assets across the world potentially. And one of the things that happens, and I'm sure it doesn't happen with ultra high net worth individuals, but a lot of times when clients ask their RMs a particular question, the RM doesn't have information immediately available. The typical flow over there is an RM will say, hey, let me get back to you. Checks with the team internally, and then a day or two later, there's an email or a call or saying that, hey, this is what you asked for. You can't do that with your HNI clients. Like, the HNI clients demand a much higher level of service, and they now know it's possible with AI. That's what a lot of large banks are doing as well. One of the things that we are currently implementing is where we pull in the client's live portfolio of assets across the world, and we scan the market, the news cycles on what is actually happening with respect to those assets. And we constantly monitor it. It's like the RM having an executive assistant whose job is only to scan the news all time. And then it matches it to the portfolio, creates a synopsis so that every morning when the RM wakes up, like there is a 2 or a 3 page available for them to read through. And if there is any sentiment which is positive or negative on that client's portfolio, they can be proactive and call up the client and say, hey, I need to have a 10 minutes with you because we need to fix this, which is very different from the client calling up and saying, hey, what's going on? Like, can you give me some viewpoints? That's one example. The other example I think you can, that we have already deployed is essentially this aspect of, meta research. Like a lot of family offices and wealth managers, they have these advisory teams, like their internal research teams, essentially, who crunch reports from multiple sources in order to create in-house sort of views, like internal research, like how do they want to deploy the cash? How do they want to take decisions in terms of investments? We simplify that. We basically bring in trusted sources. So it's not basically like a situation where you search on existing AI models and it scans through the web. Some information might be right, some might be wrong, and then what you're getting is somewhere in between, a little hallucinated sort of a view. We pre-qualify, we pre-vet the sources that go into the research database, so that what you get out is high quality research output. So that what the report that you build, let's say you want to increase position in a stock or decrease position in a stock, we will work with the client to make sure that the research input is correct, so that the output is really, really high quality.
So Partha, let me draw your attention into this very unique problem that financial institutions face and wealth managers face. Large language models are obviously they take their own time to update. Outlooks on stocks can change very, very quickly. How are you solving for that? Because from your answer, I felt like you are solving for that. First of all, you are solving for that, right? How are you solving for that? That is my question.
Okay, so let me explain a little bit from a technical perspective. So there's a concept called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's often thrown around, like a lot of people know it, but then there's RAG and there's RAG. Like there's good quality and sort of not so good quality of how it's implemented. What we've done is essentially, because we work with compact models, like smaller models, you need to have the pipeline of data really, really well. A really large language model like ChatGPT is very forgiving. You can be lazy and it will still work. But when it comes to compact model, it's almost like it's precise engineering.
Right.
How this works is the language model itself, the CLM itself, or the SLM, interchangeably, as the industry calls it, understands language, which is the language that you and I are talking, let's say English, for example, and it also understands the language that the industry speaks in.
Right.
Which means doctors speak very differently from a wealth manager. There is different terms and different glossary.
Right.
So once that model is developed and tuned for sort of deployment, you give that model the ability to fetch the data in real time and interpret the data and answer your questions.
Yes.
So it acts like a really, really smart librarian. Right. So instead of talking to an Einstein about physics, you're actually going to a librarian who has the entire physics library, not just of Einstein, but every other physicist at disposal. So you ask the librarian a question, he or she is just going to run around, fetch the right books, read it very quickly, and answer the question for you. So if the books change, which is like, so the stock market information changes, the librarian, the AI model itself is still able to fetch that information and answer your question quickly.
Okay, so basically, this is very interesting because obviously this is like mind-boggling for me. So a compact language model could basically take a new outlook that has come in from the CIO, or from the investment researcher, etc., and refer to that as opposed to what was released maybe 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
It can obviously account for recency of information because the information is not in the brain of the model itself.
Yes.
Right. So it knows where to fetch that information from. And it's not just a compact language model. You can do this with even the largest of the models that are out there.
Right.
It's the ability of a small model, again, to pull the data from the outside into your company's infrastructure, like where you have defined for it to be in, and then merge it with your infra in order to sort of create that magic.
Right.
Like we really think this, like magic really happens where your private data, which is often your most sensitive data, like you don't want to deal, and most strategic data as well. When that meets like the outside news cycles or contemporary data, that is where intelligence really comes in. And that's pretty much what we try to solve for.
That is amazing. I don't know if I am a big fan of you guys, but you're solving hyper-personalization the way it needs to be solved. It needs to look at your preferential data, your transaction, everything about you.
Right.
It needs to look at the whole outlook, whole research analysis, etc., and how it is changing, and it needs to marry the two. This part cannot leave, obviously, cannot be on a public cloud. This part can be anywhere it can, and then you have to marry this somewhere.
Absolutely.
Guys, that is amazing. So basically, how everybody has gone out and said hyper-personalization is a very big opportunity. I have done so. I did this article with the Asian private banker about 4 years ago, and I said this is the biggest opportunity because I see that as the ability of a bank to democratize great advice to even not only ultra high net worth, but high net worth as well.
Yeah.
And this has been one of the stumbling blocks. And the journey that you just took me through, that was just amazing, on how you will solve this.
I think the way to think about this is, I think a lot of people think of compliance and regulation as roadblocks. They aren't.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be guiding principles that protect, the population, like in the financial ecosystem.
Yeah.
If your innovation can't account for that, then you're not really solving a real problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I agree.
from our perspective, like we see regulations as important. We see especially the regulations around privacy as important. I mean, the whole industry like of LLMs or AI or Gen AI has gotten a bad rap. Like, every other day there is a new case that's going around in terms of data and privacy related issues. But if you can't factor that in and build around those regulations, which are absolutely critical, then you're not pushing the boundaries of innovation. And essentially that's pretty much what we're trying to do.
Yep. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree that, listen, guys, this is the industry we have chosen to work in.
Yes, exactly.
That this is regulated. The regulators have to protect the investors, the retail guys, the deposits, etc. So there will be regulations, there will be all these processes. So this is the industry we choose to work in.
Yep.
Pharma doesn't come back and say, why do we have to go through all these clinical trials? You just pop a drug and, we'll see what happens, right? So I think that is the closest I think the financial industry can relate to. So great answer. I don't think I've ever had an episode where we have sat down and we've been talking and we just realized we have solved the biggest problem of wealth management, which is hyper-personalization. And, we are addressing that in case I am really hoping you get like calls from like 5 or 6 big banks and they're like, Partha, we need to solve hyper-personalization.
Oh,
Can you
that'll
come
be amazing. Like we can actually take the private data. It'll never leave the client's infrastructure and then sort of create magic out of it for certain.
Great answer. And I'm really hoping that it happens. And guys, so this is a great team. This is not a paid sales pitch, but I genuinely believe this is a great team.
Thank you.
Solving real world problems. So by all means, you should reach out, have a conversation on how they can help you. Before we let you go, let's do a crystal ball because,
okay.
You've been very good. We'll give you some scenarios.
Sure.
And I'm also thinking of these scenarios right at the moment we speak. So guys, the whole AI industry has a regulatory problem.
Yeah.
Where do you think this will end?
I think this is again crystal ball. So I'm not betting. I'm not taking bets on this. So
no problem.
But I think what will happen is regulators around the world will start getting more and more stern with how AI is being deployed. And it's not just from a financial industry perspective. Like there is already this whole topic of sovereign AI.
Yeah.
Because it goes beyond finance. It goes into, let's say, a country's other sectors, right? Like public sector and the government sector. So a lot of countries will start looking at AI from a perspective as a national asset, really, like language models as a national asset as well. And the simple fact is, like, a company like ours has demonstrated that, I mean, a revenue funded company has pre-trained a language model and we've open sourced it on, for everyone to use and sort of build on top of our framework. The future is going to be where companies will start creating their own models for privacy. Large language models will continue. I think there'll be more scrutiny over how data gets used, how data gets consumed, and how it is sort of used within the ecosystem. But I think models will all coexist. So large models will coexist with small models will coexist with tiny models. There'll be models probably on our phone, on our watches at some point of time.
Yeah.
And that's probably the future that we are looking at. Like there's not one AI, there's several AIs which will sort of run around us.
And that will address the regulatory concerns?
It will, because you can then orchestrate your AI workflows by choosing the right model for the right data that is at your disposal.
Okay.
And then it becomes like an orchestra. It's no longer that there is just one person doing the whole music, but then you have a conductor who's basically running an orchestra of LLMs, CLMs, SLMs, blah, 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 and essentially making an organization more productive, more efficient, and sort of thriving in the future.
Great. Great answer. It is an educational journey, this episode. I really
As much,
feel, yeah, I really feel privileged to be asking you this question. Now, second part, is AI in a hype bubble?
oh, for sure.
How do you
100%.
think this will end?
I think like every new tech innovation, like year 2000, like, internet came in and there were portals and portals and portals, and there was a bubble burst after that. There was blockchain, like where for a moment everyone was launching a coin or was going blockchain. I think there is the AI washing season going on. Like every single person in the world who has an idea is thinking about how can I make it AI.
Yeah.
So for sure there is a hype cycle, and I think the hype cycle has probably settled a little bit already, because people are asking about what's really happening, what's the deployment cost, like, what's the run cost of these sort of models that we're deploying, what does it take to maintain the AI infrastructure in a company, like do we have the talent to do that. So a lot of questions are coming about. My guess what is going to happen is clients will mature in terms of deploying AI for where it makes sense. Like Gen AI is not a single magic pill that cures everything in an organization.
Right.
Clients will actually start having, like, and we've heard this many times, that there are AI councils being formed within companies where they're taking a serious, like, strategic long-term look in terms of where Gen AI should go. And the hype has started settling as of right now. I think what will happen after that hype has settled fully is stronger companies and stronger use cases which truly make sense will emerge and will sort of stay for the long course.
So there will be something left after the bubble is burst.
The reality simply is that I think Gen AI is one of the most revolutionary technologies that has come in at least our lifetime, to be honest. Like, because one of the things that amazes me about Gen AI is that you can be a teenager or you can be a 90-year-old grandfather. If you know how to chat with someone,
that is amazing.
You can already engage with the technology.
Yeah.
There's zero barriers to engaging with the technology.
And Jin, the author of the Simplicity Playbook for Innovation was here, and we talked about this, that how ChatGPT and some of these models have made it easier to engage with, and that is possibly why this is great answer. And guys, if you have not watched the episode with Jin, please go. It is a master class in how you should run digital transformation. How do you run innovation? It is a great episode. Call out to Jin on that, and great thought leader. Last question for you. When we talk about AI, there is a general sense of fear of disruption by AI. 2 parts question. How real is it? And what could you do today to not get disrupted?
Okay. Short answer, how real it is very real. I don't want to mince words. Like it's some of it is hype again. Like a lot of people saying that it's going to change the way work happens, and there's going to be sort of mass layoffs, etc. Maybe that's a little overhyped.
Yeah.
But it is going to have an impact. It is like a technology cycle which would take about 10 to 15 years to really replace like an industry or an older technology is actually happening within months now.
Yeah.
So it's very, very real. And and as I said, because the access is so much easier and engaging with the technology is so much easier, it is a disruptive technology. There's zero doubt about it. How can then, if it is such a disruptive technology, be ready for when that happens? The first thing is it's already happening right now. How can you not get disrupted as an individual? I would say engage with it. Like it's honestly like one of the most accessible piece of tech that has come out. Like blockchain was difficult, like for a lot of people to understand. Here you can engage with the tech immediately right now. Like you can flip a phone open and you can start conversing and ask questions and see how it responds, right? The ecosystem around, if you want to learn a little bit more, is stunning. Like, I mean, YouTube is an amazing place to just learn about sort of what's happening in the world of LLMs and where the whole industry is going. There are amazing free courses available where you can go right from like the absolute basic to like even if you're not a technologist, like honestly, I would truly urge this, like figure out how to download a model and run it on your laptop. It's amazing to do that. It's so much fun to do that. And you don't have to be a coder. You don't have to be a developer to really do that. You can actually figure it out yourself and learn how to talk to LLMs. It is an art. Like I think prompt engineering tunes a lot of people off because they feel that, oh my God, it's a really heavy term. Like what is prompt engineering? It's just a different way of talking. And if you can engage with a human that you have met, and you can adjust the way you talk based on the responses that you get and have a good conversation, I think you can also learn how to get better quality output from LLMs or from Gen AI just by learning how to talk differently, like how to talk in the language that the machine understands.
Absolutely great answer. What we are going to do is we are going to make it a little easier for all of you to engage with AI. Partha talked about a lot of courses that are freely available. We are going to keep him true to his word. We are going to get all the links and we are going to put out a post and we are going to share those. So, and you can thank Partha, Calvin, and all the guys who have collated that, when we post that out. But thank you so much, Partha.
Thanks, Laksh.
We've had a great chat. It was, truly a learning experience sitting here.
It's just wonderful.
Thank you.
And talking to you.
Thank you, sir. And
we've had, I think we've spoken a lot like about these things. This is the first time I think we're sitting in front of these mics, but it's been a really pleasure experience.
Thank you, sir. And what we are going to do next is we are going to bring in Jeet, who is our co-host. You have met him before, on the episode we released. And he's going to talk to Calvin, who is one of the other co-founders of Pints, who is also an Air Force pilot. He's doing his PhD. Absolutely amazing guy.
He's had a very colorful life, way better than the kind of our origin stories.
Yeah, exactly. I have to agree with that without going into the details. So we are going to bring them in, stick around and hear them out. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. This is the part 2 of the earlier episode, which you have seen with Partha from Pint.ai. This is the second part of it. My name is Jeet. I've been with banking industry for the last 20 years. And here I am in a conversation with Mr. Calvin from Pint. So as in the previous episode you have seen, this Mr. Calvin had a very colorful and very interesting life. So I'll start with introduction. So hi, Calvin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, so welcome to Digijanus. And, why don't you start with, giving your introduction, because what I've seen is you have a very pretty interesting background. You've been Air Force pilot and then now you're doing some amazing stuff in AI.
Yeah, so most certainly. So a very quick introduction about myself is that I've been coding since I was 14 years old. And then I got into this whole space of AI sometime 20 years ago, where there was just computer vision. And then eventually I joined the Air Force because I was looking for a scholarship. They got me one, and then at the same time, I think it's a pretty interesting career. Served for 14 years in there. During which I kept warm with programming by maintaining some open source projects. And then once I decided to move on to something else, go back to my first passion and interest, which is in AI, started this company, Pint AI. And right now we are looking at enabling financial institutions to move on to the next bound of productivity with private AI solutions.
Okay, so I think we already heard a lot about Pint AI from Partha. So in this conversation, what we are going to do is we are going to make it a little more real, that how this Pint.ai is going to help the organizations. So our discussion is going to be towards that, how Pint is going to work with different institutes, what kind of value proposition you are going to create, what is the uniqueness of Pint.ai and why only Pint.ai?
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you tell me something about your company, what specifically you do, how old is this, and what kind of problems you are solving specifically?
Right.
And problem solving for who? Is it for the direct customers? Is it for the employee of the organizations, engineers, or the product managers? Something like that.
So I think the specific problem that we're looking to solve in the context of financial institutions is to enable private and confidential data to be used with absolute ease with Gen AI, which is a tool that we know will help us boost our productivity. Now, when we look at the extent of the data that we're using right now with public-facing APIs, cloud models, it's pretty much just kind of like scratching the surface of what we can do.
Right.
And if we want to put our mind at ease and not be worried about hallucination as well as token costs, once we're able to bring in that stack which Pints AI offer, we will be able to unlock a huge part of our domain knowledge that is very strategic, and also some of the most biggest area that can drive productivity, such as meeting minutes, strategic reports, internal documents, PII data, so on and so forth. And I think as in a broad nutshell, then who are we actually solving for within a bank? We like to say that it wouldn't be everyone, but if it's top of mind for any CTO or CIO to be thinking about embarking a journey, like we bring the solution end to end by helping them solve compliance problems, infrastructure problems, as well as model training capabilities right out of the box.
But so now the second question is, we have this ChatGPT and we have this larger models and all those things, which is also kind of working with companies. So what is these differentiation about that? Why not ChatGPT or any other bigger tool or any bigger company versus this thing? I'm not very clear that what kind of areas you are focusing on and what kind of problems you're solving.
Yeah, thank you for that question. We do get that a lot. Like and given the permanence of ChatGPT and its prominence as well, we do need to highlight the difference down here. And I think the first main thing that we're looking at is really the aspect of owning your AI. So ChatGPT provides a very convenient way to start doing stuff, to start an innovation, to go about exploring, experimenting some stuff, and it gets expensive very quickly. After you're looking at a small use case blown into scaled up into many thousands of employees. I think that's part one. Part two is that there are a lot of use cases where you need very low latencies, very fast response time, and when we're talking about ChatGPT, that's really not nearly as fast as what Pints AI can offer, because whatever a properly trained model, a properly fine-tuned model with our recipe can really bring the size of the model down to a much smaller one, which then makes it a lot faster and enables a lot more use cases. And that is how we felt it should be the more artisanal way, the more trade a way where if you apply the right trade craft, how AI should be used.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, what you're trying to say that this ChatGPT and this the bigger models and all those things, they have a model, but that is based on the very broad based kind of data and all those things. What you are building is the custom AI models, which specifically works for particular use cases in the bank, which is very it doesn't consume that much of power, compute power, and all those things. So that leads to my another question: that is this the product what you have, or is this the service what you provide?
So this is by and large the service that we provide. So and thanks for framing the question, the answer to the previous question in a more elegant manner, and segueing into this part about question about like whether or not this is the service of the product. So doing that extent of like customization and looking at specific workflows and creating models out to serve those specialized workflows, even down to a possibility of making small enough models that doesn't require servers and can run on desktops or on laptops to facilitate certain use cases is exactly the service that we provide. And it comes end to end because we have and doesn't require really a very long drawn process, because we have a set of frameworks given that we have trained a model that is done in 9 days in a very small model, creates a framework that allows us to look at this specific use case, this specific workflows, and then create data sets very quickly in an automated way, and create a training workflow in also an automated way to then allow and enable such implementation. So I'll just maybe use a very quick example of one of implementation that we have done. So client requires looking at a huge amount of documents in a banking process where you're going through due diligence and KYC. Now, the process by itself is fairly straightforward and simple. You have someone on the desk looking through KYC documents, what is missing, what is not missing, are the forms all filled out. That requires today, till this date, someone to manually go through those documents. But if you have an AI that is specifically trained to look at these documents, it doesn't have to be a very big AI model in this case. A small one will do, and it will be very fast to the extent that it can run on a laptop. Will then take over the task of verification to the extent that, firstly, it facilitates the human effort by making sure that even if those that are outrightly already not there, you could make an action out of it instead of waiting for a whole review process to complete. And the second thing would be that because these tasks are very mundane, human error can happen due to mode error and boredom specifically, which then in that case, having this AI to support these sort of tasks helps to raise accuracy and make sure that no documents are that should be in place are not there.
So no, again, let's go back to this whole the custom model versus the large model. So large model, I understand that there are many data points which needs to be looked at it, and then accordingly the large data needs to be processed. That's how the compute is increasing. But if you go back to the basics of AI, the AI is there for quite some time. And I call it a traditional AI, where where we used to have this rule-based checks, where if you check these 8 fields and you check the accuracy, whether everything is correct or not, and then you say, okay, there's an error, and we generate the error, and then we notify some particular either the compliance people or the risk people and all. So this custom model, is this on the same lines, or how it is different from this rule-based AI what we used to use a few years back?
Yeah, you point at a very important part of the history, which is during the budding years of AI, where what we have is it's really just rule-based algorithms more than they are any sort of intelligence. So when we move, the impetus to move away from that underscores the reason why this is different. So if you look at how a rule-based algorithm works, it's confined to a prescribed set of documents in a prescribed set of manner, with a to detect a prescribed input. So whether or not the input, it can detect whether the input is there or not, but it cannot detect whether or not the input is accurate or correct. So someone can write their name or they can draw a squiggly. No one really knows whether or not that is correct. And then along with that, we also have to factor for maybe some of the documents that comes in as a scanned document that may require OCR, which then produces an output that needs to be verified, and not just with rule-based yes or no. So this kind of creates a shift away from a rudimentary check to just say, yes, the name column is filled out, to yes, the name column matches what was filled out in the IC or the identification that was provided, which if you extend it to the rest of the content, where some of it can get a little bit more in a sense of like declaration of source of wealth. AI model is going to give more context and more accuracy when it comes to and more automation when it comes to that.
Okay, so I think I understood, what your product, what your a company do. So it's basically very light. You build the models which are very light resource consumption. You are building the custom models which is solving the one specific or specific use cases of the problems, and this is how you're generating the value that some of the larger organization cannot rely on the bigger companies. So now let's switch the gears and then let's talk about some of the implementation practicalities and all those things. So I understand that you're building these models, but tell me one thing: for each and every use case, do we need to rely always on the Pint.ai, or that you have some platform which can enable even the banking data analytics team or the AI team to generate those use cases on their own?
So I think our approach is that in this current day and age, it would make a lot of sense for us to provide tools that is of enablement quality rather than an entrenchment quality. So we don't entrench organizations into you must pay X amount more dollars for X amount more modification. Our stack is not modular and it's difficult to build on, but rather the other way around to allow an enablement. And I think it is. And how we go about doing that, and why do we want to go about doing that? Is that I think firstly, when a platform is modular and expandable, it creates a lot of stickiness to use it, to create more stuff out of it, and allows true use cases to be discovered. And through that, I think there is more than enough use cases in the context of AI for a bank to really explore once the framework is right. Leading on to that, I think that when it comes to a successful strategy in terms of acquiring AI has to be one that maximizes the value of the team. So if a company scales up its data science and its technical resources, it must be to do something really meaningful and great that pushes beyond boundaries for the bank's purposes, and not really to have to worry about the pipelining and not really have to worry about the infrastructural requirements. That I think is where our value is in terms of having all those sorted out. I'll probably say at this juncture to point to kind of like an analogy. Not that we are, but like I think like SpaceX is a really good inspiration. Like it doesn't bother itself in terms of like the missions of NASA, which is like to explore galaxies beyond galaxies to figure out what really is out there. Those like the scientists and the exploration in terms of the workflows of developing NASA missions should be centered around discoveries, not around discovering how to launch rockets more efficiently, though it has been doing that. But that is where like SpaceX comes in to provide these solutions so that NASA can think what it should be thinking about, which are mission oriented, not so much about infra. And I think that's where if a good vendor can be brought in to help with part of the AI strategy, that we can, I think, truly unlock what the internal resourcing are meant to do, which are the missions of the company.
I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're trying to say, okay, you do which is more value for the bank, and this part can be managed by the Pints AI.
Yes, that's correct. Because we'll look across, we won't know what the missions of the banks are. That's for your data scientists and your AI engineers to figure out. We look through all the different banks and figure out what sort of pipelining do we need to do to enable them to go further into their AI mission.
So how the engagement happens, with the bank? So let's say, if you're working with in bank or non-bank, I'm assuming that you're not only focusing on the financial industry, you're open for other industries as well, right? Because this kind of requirements can come from everywhere. So let's take an example of whosoever is your client with whom you are actively engaging. So how is the engagement with them? Is it on a regular basis you speak, weekly, monthly? Is your resources are sitting in the in particular organization, or they just tell you the requirement and you deliver it and then deploy it? How it works?
So how we think that AI needs to work in an organization right now requires a fairly high amount of touch, because we're not talking about a implementation of a piece of software, and then later on is mostly just developing maybe some additional features and then bug fixing. We're talking about a transformation. We imagine by now, and having gone through several discussions, that there are a lot of organizations that are looking at AI transformation. So, which literally means that almost in every possible manner, where are the spaces that we can use AI for? Let's start off with the low-hanging fruits and make your way up. And this is unlike software, which has already penetrated to every corners of an organization. So in helping to serve that, it has to be quite high touch.
Yeah.
It has to be like, okay, and proactive in nature. So it has to be like, we know that there's this problem that exists. What is the next one that the client will have or we may foresee? And we build our infrastructure that way. We modularize things in that particular order. And then when it comes to the right juncture, to have that conversation with the client to see whether or not this is what is top of mind. And it's probably at the time where the low-hanging fruits are done, and then now the other lower-hanging fruits.
Okay, so Calvin, so I'll ask you the question on the same lines that. So initially, you are doing the hand-holding of the organization so that organizations start to learn how to build these models and all those things along with you. But from a longer-term perspective, when these companies have already started learning, in that case, what kind of value Pint.ai adds in a longer run?
Right.
Because if they start building, then there is a possibility that they have the data scientists, they have the data analytics team, and they themselves can build these kind of custom models.
Yes. So most certainly true. And I won't imagine that anyone or any organization that grew that large has lack of aspirations to push frontier technologies within their own adaptation strategy. So I would say that it is realistic to cater for this, in the sense that at the initial and at the beginning, there will be clients who will not have a coherent or a well thought out plan at the beginning, just trying out stuff, which is a good way to start, and then evolve into more mature phase where you will have aspirations to make it on your own and create some products in-house. And I think this is where it is also important for us to recognize and help on this portion, where given that the aspirations are there, that Pints AI can initially help out with building out some customization, get the journey started, get in the right frameworks, and lay down the foundation. And eventually, as and when there are internal tools that a bank need to build, that we provide research in that area. So Pints AI we don't just we're always looking at frontier technology and trying to invent the new way and a better way of doing stuff. And it's a little bit like when you're going about your own journey, there are a lot of walls that you kind of need to knock down. And if we can knock down a wall, it has economies of scale for us to do so, because that same advice gets offered out to 10 other customers. The economics of scale for a bank to do so may not be there, which then because that this can be actually had for if a good service provider comes in to say, hey, you know what, we also have this piece of technology. If you're looking at this now, this is how we kind of do it.
Okay, so can I say that what you're doing is you're helping the larger organization to save time in learning or kind of a decomposition of the bigger problems into small, then they don't have to spend time doing the POCs or doing the experiments, because that experiment and that might cost in the larger organization higher. That's the part you will take care, and then you say, okay, this one we have already tested, this is the research we have already done, and this will work, this will not work, that kind of thing.
I think this is exactly right. So in the development of AI tools, there's a sort of trial and error that needs to happen before you arrive at something correct. And given the skill of AI tooling that Pints AI will build, more likely than not come across these problems, and even just a quick check with us can help to save a lot of time, to accelerate a lot of learning, and reduce going to the wrong direction, and therefore speed to market.
Yeah. Okay. So I think now I understood that what is the value you are kind of adding. Now let's talk about, Gen AI or AI, it basically dependent on the data. And the large amount of data is basically the sensitive or the customer data. And because at the end of the day, the large number of use cases what a larger organization are building is related to personalization or the hyper-personalization. And that's where the customer data becomes very, very important. And we know that, the customer data or any kind of a sensitive data cannot leave the bank. It cannot go outside of the bank. So in that way, how the Pint AI is ensuring that the privacy remains there, the sensitivity remains there, that it is not read by anyone else stay within the bank, how you're solving that problem.
Yeah. So the premise of how we set about creating our solution starts off with understanding what the infrastructure limitations are in having in-house solution possible. And along with that, we then went about doing the right kind of research to make that happen, which then creates a AI stack that we have right now that allows all of these workflows to be in a private environment. And that can also be, it can be on-premise, it can be on private cloud. Now, once we have, and I'm sure in your position, all banks knows that once you have control of where the extent of the infrastructure within an office, within a private cloud, within VPN, the privacy issues becomes a lot more controllable, as opposed to we need to send it over the wire to a public model that sits somewhere else in Seattle or in Chicago. Then the safeguards have to be there, and audit needs to come in, cybersecurity needs to come in. A whole slew of problems comes along. So we started with the thought that why don't we see if it's possible to just allow the model, create a model that can stay in its place, and then that in itself solves a lot of problems. And we managed to do that, which is why the conversations we're having are from people who are worried about privacy and all worried about having to go through the multiple hoops, which just takes up a lot of resources. Like you just use all the time to think about how the product should work and how you should create really strong AI workflows that reaps the benefit.
In a nutshell, what you're saying, it can be deployed in the within the bank's environment, and then data doesn't have to leave the bank there, and then the whole the processing and everything is done within the bank itself.
Yeah, so that's exactly right.
Yeah, but is within that, do you also need to ensure that what is the minimum infrastructure required? Because there's a minimum compute capability which is required, right? Because since the data is not going outside, so the compute is happening within the bank.
Yes.
So you assess that kind of infrastructure needs of the particular organization.
Yeah, most certainly. So actually, that's our bread and butter. Like at the very initial, when we are looking at how AI can stay on premise, the infrastructure requirements is already scoped out. So depending on how many concurrent users or the skill of what the AI model or the particular product needs to serve, we have those numbers readily available. So
and do you customize the models based on the existing infrastructure of the organization so that it works?
Yes, it goes both ways. There's a wish list of like how if you want to allow the solutions to scale ahead of time so that we don't have to worry downstream, as well as process maybe some additional scope that may not be originally envisioned, so you give yourself some developmental buffer and plan into the future. Then the infrastructure can come a little bit earlier. The amount that we put, the amount of resourcing that goes there. But in most instances, there will be cases, there are a lot of cases where we look at what infrastructure we have to deal with, and then build out the AI solution according to that, so that maybe that's the first step to go about starting the journey. And then from then on, more resourcing can be put in once a successful product has been built.
Okay, so understand. So I'll tell you the another one, generally the issue comes whenever some company or some product company or some service company comes to any organization, and then at the start of the thing everybody claims that our product is easy to integrate, whatever data you have in whichever format, in whichever systems you have, in whichever format, we don't need any kind of special APIs for integration and all those things. But when it comes to reality, the integration becomes so high that by the time we implement the solution, it takes a lot of time, because there are certain requirements that somebody needs to organize the data in this particular format, share the data in this particular format, and the whole implementation takes a lot of time. So how the Pint AI is dealing with this kind of an issue?
So you just highlighted a very important problem that we often have to deal with. And at the beginning, I would say at the beginning we weren't thinking about this. We thought that in organizations there would be proper policies around how to store data, and that it would be readily put away neatly in places to then just be ingested. Often not that became not true, and we found it to be more of a it's an evergreen problem, right? Because a lot of this organization of data requires diligence in human beings to make sure that happens, and that's actually where the beauty of AI lies. Like we don't actually need the data to be super structured, super organized, and properly classified. AI can do that. So as soon as we realized that, we started building automated tools to first we identify that, actually such problem really exists, that even to go to implementation phase, we have to help clean up the data, to help reorganize the data. And then we started building tools around that to solve that problem. So right now, this day, I'm happy to say that after having gone through a few hoops, that almost any clients can just come to us with data in whatever shape and form, and we will have AI tools that will help organize them to then enable the product building and development phase after that.
So, based on whatever clients you have worked with or integrations you have done, what was the best time to market or time to implement? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? What was for a simple use case? I'm not talking about a very complex, but what was the simplest one where you started the work and then within X months you went?
So we're a startup. We're nimble. We need to be fast. We set ourselves the goals of simple use case within 30 days, and a medium to hard use case typically between 3 to 6 months. Nothing more than that. And case in point, we have done the several POCs that we have done so far. Were deployed nothing more than within 6 months of kickoff for complex ones, and for POCs that are relatively straightforward, it has never really exceeded time span of 2 to 3 weeks, even though the hard limit is set as 1 month.
Okay, so now let's let me ask you another question, which is again very big in the AI, because see, the claim to AI is that, it is going to reduce the human intervention and is going to do a lot of things which is automated. But in reality, the thing is, whenever we are sending something to the customer, whether this is human generated or whether this is a machine generated, even in the human generated, we have a maker checker kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, somebody needs to check. And with the AI, the accuracy is one of the biggest thing, because we can't just send anything to customer which is generated by the machine by the time we have the enough amount of confidence. So what's your take on this accuracy part of the Pint AI, and how do you measure that?
Yes. So again, this is a very, very important question to ask in order to understand like the limitations, as well as what needs to go behind the product building phase. And I'll say to that when we started building this solution, we were already cognizant of the fact that hallucination happens a lot, and will oftentimes be a determinant factor to say, no, I think we just cannot use this. 70% not good enough. If we look at what ChatGPT has done in that regard, in their release of O1, you will see that there's this process where it goes by thinking to itself and then talking to itself. That is essentially what we have been doing since the beginning, because we know that the verification layer is required. And the only way to kind of bring that down is to have the AI model check on its own output. And then finally, I think that there is also a expectation that needs to be managed. That whichever the case, we're looking at a baseline of a human normal error rates, and we're really just using AI to raise that, because fundamentally, at a complex enough task, errors can still be made. And a man in the loop is still important. The state of the art right now, I don't think we're kind of ready for it. There's a lot of regulations around it, and how is it that we're going to hold an AI accountable is still a very, very big question that needs to be answered, and regulation that needs to be cast before that can happen. So the encouraging factor down here is that it's definitely able to help relieve and improve accuracy to a high degree once this maker checker sort of algorithm is in there, which we have. And finally, human training involved to help people understand that you still have to check the work. It's just that now it's been made faster, easier, and starting off with a higher accuracy to for you to add on top of.
Okay, so Calvin, I think so far very nice conversation, very engaging. So I think now we are at the section 3 of the conversation, where I want to understand about what is the uniqueness or what is the USP of Pint AI, and who are your competitors? Because I'm sure that you are not the only company who is trying to solve the problem. And so who are the competitors, and then what is the uniqueness about Pint AI? Because there are larger companies where the large organizations are using, like Anthropy and Cloud. They also have these custom models. So how you're competing with them, and what's the differentiation, how you're creating the differentiation with them?
Yeah. So certainly a great conversation up to this point, and can see that the difficulty of the question has escalated to finally this one. This we get asked a lot as well, and certainly you're right. We're no short of competitors within the region or even globally, and given the nature of how AI is and the speed of the development and extent, no one's really prevented from using a solution that is outside of outside their own country and in any other regions. So our first of all, with regard to the whether or not we see companies building internal capabilities to then build on their own as a problem or as a threat is that we think that's the most immediate thing that will happen. Like our immediate competitors wouldn't be ChatGPT or Anthropic, but the fact that we are already in a company meant that we have been selected over them, or we're selected as one of the many, of a few. But that's naturally, once you have the capability and once you have the infrastructure that we provide, it's really unlike having just use ChatGPT, where most of it is still not with you, and you start to see more possibilities. I think we want internal, we want that competition to happen. We want companies to develop their own capabilities to the extent that maybe they will not need us as much, because if that happens, we have already succeeded. And then we can move on to higher value tasks, like providing research inputs and also serve other customers. And along the journey, productize and get some of these modules available for the long tail. The second part of this is that, what about natural competitors like OpenAI and Anthropic and in the likes? I think that competition in such a space where premiums are high and that a lot of productivity gains are to be had. I think really we're just scratching the surface of what AI can do. We really like scene one, act one of AI. As we go deeper into this journey and we start to realize that so it can do so much more, and now with smaller models, more can happen, that more players will just come in to naturally displace incumbents. And I would say to that that should be more than enough to go around, because we're really looking at a tool that is applicable in many areas, many different areas of an organization. And therefore, the pie that we're kind of like really talking about is really big to begin with. So we will say that we welcome competition, and that there's enough areas to work on.
Thank you very much, Calvin. The last question is, what's next for Pint AI?
Right. There are many things that are happening. I'll just point to one or two of them. We are excited about building the next generation of model architecture that will hopefully replace Transformer, because Transformer architecture is extremely inefficient. And once we get around that problem, this is where it depends on who you listen to, and whether or not how near we are to artificial general intelligence. It has to first probably break through the limitations of the current architecture, whether by improving compute or by improving the architecture itself. So we're really excited about that. Research has been ongoing to try to discover that. The second thing that we would like to really point to is that a company AI company providing service is actually immensely profitable in terms of the kind of work that we can do, and the kind of use cases, the abundance of use cases that there is to have for us to explore and build. But I think fundamentally, in terms of having an aspiration, so Pints as a vision, a company vision, wishes to bring AI, industry grade AI tools to everyone. So we will go about in parallel a productization journey that will also create tools that people can access, whether or not they are in or outside of enterprises. I think that would really help to bring value to as well as, and obviously along with that, revenue for the company.
Yeah. Very interesting. Thanks a lot, Calvin. It was interesting to know you. I know that you have a very diverse background. Started coding in 14 years, then you become Air Force pilot, and then building an AI company. Very inspiring. And my best wishes to Pints.ai, to Partha and you. All the best.
Thank you for your kind words. It has been really important questions asked. I truly enjoy the session that we have here, and much thanks to you for asking these difficult questions and hearing out the answers. And most importantly, I think that we have covered the important points that people do need to hear in a very candid fashion. Hopefully that's the case, at least in my opinion. And surely that was with your help that these discussions can be brought out. So
Thank you.
Enjoy it very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.